Davy D. Zebek. His name is Davy D. Zebek. Oda just dropped another crazy lore bombshell, and this changes everything we thought we knew about Rocks, about Blackbeard, and about the God Valley incident, but also everything we thought we knew about Shanks. In chapter 1159, it's revealed that Rocks D. Zebek, as we've come to know him, is not in fact his real name. Instead, Zebek's true family name is Davy, tying both his lineage as well as that of his son, Teach, aka Blackbeard, to the legendary pirate Davy Jones. Now confirmed to also harbor the D initial as Davy D Jones, an influential figure whose name still commands influence within the underworld and is someone considered so dangerous that the world government has been trying to erase his name from history. And I just want to take a moment here to say that it is huge that Rocks, out of all people, would choose to live under a different name. Because if even the legendary Ruthless Rocks, a man who, at least so far, has not shown fear under any circumstances, if he is scared or at least concerned of the consequences or implications of proudly bearing his true full name, that means the Davy D name is of a level that even he feels unable to control. Because while the argument could be that Rocks is just trying to protect his family and his clan from being targeted, as we saw in chapter 1159, the world government is unaware that Rocks hails from God Valley, meaning that they don't really know where he's from or where his family are, and that goes back to my point. Even Rocks wants to avoid the reverberations of having his true name revealed to the world. Which then of course raises the all-important question, why? What makes the Davy D family name so special? What is it about this specific clan, out of all the D clans, that makes them stand out, makes them so dangerous? So I think this means it's time to revisit who Davy Jones may be. In case you're not aware, Davy Jones is a real-life pirate legend in our world, a figure who became the personified form or a euphemism for death at sea, often by drowning. His name was predominantly used in reference to his locker, whereby going to Davy Jones's locker meant to sink to death at the bottom of the ocean, losing your life to the dark abyss of the vast and unforgiving seas. And as this legendary figure grew in the wild imaginations of pirates, he's taken on various other forms, expanding to also represent the devil, and more specifically, the Sea Devil. Which of course for us One Piece fans, it's hard for us to not stand up and scream, the devil, the Sea Devil? And by the way, I have actually discussed the meaning of Davy Jones, who he may represent, and then some theories in relation to our One Piece world, so I do highly recommend you check out this video later. And if you're someone who enjoys One Piece discussions, then you should also subscribe to the channel, because that's exactly what we do here. I love to talk One Piece non-stop, and I'd really love to have you on board our Joy Fleet so that we can discuss One Piece together. We are also so close to 100,000 subscribers, and actually it is September, so it's kind of YouTube lore for you to subscribe. Okay, so it's clear that Oda is blending real-life mythos to his own fiction seamlessly, in which case I think it's also important to go back and revisit what we know about Davy Jones in the context of One Piece. For example, in volume 38 of the SBS, Oda explains that the real-world legend of Davy Jones was a lying, no-good, greedy deck chief who put all the crew's treasures into his own locker. A pirate so wicked that the devil himself cursed Davy Jones to live at the bottom of the sea forever, including all of his treasures where it would never be seen again. And yet his name has grown in infamy, inspiring a long-held pirate tradition of the Davy back fight, whereby pirate crews would bet their own crewmates, their ships, and even their flags, i.e. their identity and pride, staking it all in a fierce and brutal game. And then more recently, it was revealed in chapter 1155 that Rocks is an admirer of Davy Jones, a follower or worshipper even. And then with this most recent reveal that Davy Jones is a part of the D clan, perhaps even representing one of the most important families within this D tribe, as a name that lives on in infamy in the underworld, the Davy D family being still seen as a threat for the world government to exterminate, as seen through their high value in their native hunting games. If we put all of this together, try to reconcile all of these threads, I think this causes us to rethink what we thought we knew about about Davy Jones. For example, that explanation from the SBS that Davy Jones is a greedy, no-good pirate, that may be just how he has been mythologized by enemies, portrayed in a negative light as a cursed and detestable man, when in fact he was a revolutionary pirate that simply opposed the world government, similar to the legend surrounding Rox as being evil, despite nothing in his flashbacks so far portraying him to be evil per se. Brutal and violent for sure, but also very human and likable. The fact that Jones's name has inspired traditions like the Davy back fight, that could be symbolic of him risking everything against oppressive forces. We all know the stakes of fighting at sea. You have to be willing to stake everything. You have to be prepared to lose your own life. That's what it means to be a pirate, especially if you're embarking on something as grand as opposing the world government. And that really resonates with the theme of One Piece. And yet Davy Jones's name is being shrouded in history, only surviving in the underworld or being remembered in a negative light. And that sort of reflects the distorted legacy of the D-Clan, how the world government has tried to paint the D-Clan as enemies. They similarly could have tried to besmirch the hero that is Davy D. Jones. After all, as part of the D-Clan, he would have also been one of the god's natural enemies. And the way that his descendants are being hunted with so much vigor, Davy Jones really must have been a leading figure that opposed the world government. And when you think about it that way, I do also wonder, could it be that Davy Jones is actually Joy Boy? Could they be the same person? After all, Joy Boy has always seemed to be much more of a nickname or an epithet rather than a real name, in which case, who else could have been so prominent, so dangerous that the world government has tried to erase their names? Joy Boy is exactly the kind of figure we've seen eliciting so much fear to make Imu tremble just at the mere memory of his power. And when you think about his name being changed or being erased by the government, the only other times, or at least to the best of my knowledge, the only other times that the world government has actively tried to hide an important name from the rest of the world is when it relates to Joy Boy. They have erased an entire century of history, and now even the study of this void century is forbidden. That's exactly what resulted in the erasure of Ohara. They've kept the true name of the Hitohito no Mi model Nika hidden for centuries, renaming it to be the Gomu Gomu no Mi, obscuring the true nature of its abilities, as well as the fact that it bears the same powers as the one that Joy Boy is said to have held. Rox himself, despite having heralded a legendary pirate era before Roger, his name has been erased from memory. And the way that Rox's story is shaping up, that too seems to be because of his ties to this forgotten history surrounding Joy Boy. I mean, we've seen characters hide their own names for their own safety, their protection. You know, characters like Ace or Law throughout the series. But it's rarer to see characters' names being changed for them by the world government. The latter motivated by a much more sinister reason of trying to keep the truth of the world hidden. So I am very intrigued at this idea of Davy D. Jones having actually been Joy Boy himself, and then this could add another layer, a new dynamic to the inevitable Luffy and Blackbeard showdown. Luffy as the inheritor of Joy Boy's will versus Blackbeard as Joy Boy's direct descendant. So then the possibility that there are these two sides to Joy Boy / Davy D. Jones, a liberator as we know Joy Boy to be versus the greedy man that he is remembered to be. That also very much lines up with the two sides to Nika as we have been introduced to in the Elbaf arc. Nika the liberator versus Nika the destroyer. So then to think that this could be very clearly visually represented via Rox's design. Rox's hair color is of two different tones, light and dark. Perhaps Oda has been giving us cheeky clues all along. Rox and Blackbeard could be the descendants of Joy Boy, i.e. Davy D. Jones, and Blackbeard represents what happens when you suffer tragedy upon tragedy from an early age, with his backstory also originating in God Valley, and knowing that he's an orphan by the time he meets Whitebeard, we already know where this is going. Blackbeard could have been a force for liberation, but because of his childhood experiences, he's embraced the the darkness. But then at the same time, I also wonder whether Joy Boy and Davy Jones could have been opposites, whether they could have been allies come enemies, both leading the D clan. Another two sides of the same coin situation. I'm envisioning sort of like a Professor X versus Magneto situation. What if the two were best friends that used to lead the D clan together, but they came from two opposing ideologies as to who or what Nika represented? Joy Boy believed in liberation for all, whereas Davy D Jones sought to crush anyone who tried to oppress the D clan. That's why we have the model Nika devil fruit being the sun god representing light, whereas Davy Jones represents the dark abyss of the sea. We have freedom via liberation versus being trapped in a locker at the bottom of the ocean. And this could be, for better or for worse, a bit reminiscent of the Ashura versus Indara rivalry from the Naruto series, which would later turn into a generational war of destiny between Naruto and Sasuke. So in the context of One Piece, if Blackbeard is the descendant of Davy Jones, could Luffy be the descendant of Joy Boy? After all, if Davy D Jones had children and descendants, then it's just as possible that Joy Boy himself also has descendants. But I'm sure you'll leave your thoughts below as to how you would feel if One Piece was to take that route, because I know that there are a lot of people who would have very strong feelings if Luffy was the literal blood relation, a blood descendant of Joy Boy. But nevertheless, regardless of how you may feel, it's hard to deny that that sort of parallel between Davy D Jones and Joy Boy would be poetic, it would be mythic, laden with lore and history, exactly the kind of storytelling that Oda loves to tell. But if we are now thinking about parallels, then we can't not discuss how Oda has now deepened the parallels between Shanks and Blackbeard. This rivalry of the two figures goes back even further than we thought, and now there is this real layer of tragedy that's going to be heartbreaking when we see them collide. So obviously there have been strong ties between Shanks and Blackbeard from the beginning of the series, especially as we found out about their respective, not so humbled pirate origins, both serving as young apprentices on opposing pirate crews who would then later go on to become warring Yonko in their own rights. But now we find out that both Shanks and Blackbeard are actually from the same hometown of God Valley, that they both faced tragedies from a very early age, terrors that were inflicted upon them by the same man, none other than Figurland Garling, who also happens to be Shanks' father. This is sick. Their history is so twisted, not only in terms of their fates being so interlaced, so intertwined and tied up together like a sticky, twisted donut, but also the crimes that were committed against them. And to make their relationship even more complicated, I can't not mention the question that is on everybody's lips. Is Shanks also a part of this Davy D clan? Could it be that these two figures are even more tied up than we realize, not only sharing a homeland but also a family name? I mean, after all, it is very suspicious that Shanks' mother's face was kept hidden from us 2 chapters in a row. Look, Oda is being very shady. I mean, what is Oda trying to hide? Will she look like Rocks, a red-haired female Zebek? I can't help but think that this could be why Shanks is known as the Child of Destiny, as per Scopogaban, the child of not only a celestial dragon, a very prominent celestial dragon, but also the descendant of Davy D Jones, meaning that Shanks bears the weight of 2 opposing generational forces. And then when you think about how Oda shows us side by side what's happening to Shanks and Blackbeard respectively in this chapter 1159, you just know it's going to get even more twisted together as the God Valley incident progresses, triggering a messy rivalry that's going to last a lifetime. Just thinking about it is making my heart pang already. The tragedy of 2 boys who, under other circumstances, could have grown up as friends, as brothers from the same homeland, potentially even cousins, family relations, instead torn apart, forced to live life as enemies. And you know what? I actually did choke up reading chapter 1159. The interaction between Rocks and Harold was so upsetting. This incredibly humanizing portrayal of Rocks had me tearing up, and a part of me wants to hold steadfast in my claims that Rocks is alive alive, that he is still alive. But even I can't ignore these very blatant death flags. Rox literally says that he's going to be happy with whatever happens to him as long as his wife and son is safe. That's a bad sign. And I know it's easy to get angry at Harold for refusing to help Rox despite his desperate pleas, but I am very firmly in the camp that Harold just had to refuse him for appearances. I mean, he did say that the Marines were watching, so I'm very much of the opinion that Harold did in fact help Rox in his own way, and we'll just later find out what that exactly was. But regardless, this side of Rox, which we've been seeing more of throughout this flashback, makes it doubly more intriguing to consider why then Roger and Garp would team up to kill him. Because I can't imagine Roger and Garp killing Rox when all he's trying to do is save his own family. So then it's only natural that we start to doubt the official story of what went down between Roger, Garp, and Rox. I mean, why would these two supposed legends, the future pirate king and hero of the Marines, two supposed good guys whom we know to have humanity, why would they stand in the way of a father just trying to save his family? But if it is true that they really did kill him, then the only explanation that I can think of is that something really tragic happened that pushed Rox beyond the point of return. Pushed him so far that Roger and Garp had no choice but to stop him. For example, imagine if Rox witnessed the murder of his wife or Teach being kidnapped. This could have definitely caused Rox to go berserk, seeing only red as he embarks on a rampage out for vengeance. Especially imagine if it was Garling that did the unthinkable, kills Rox's wife and harms Teach. And so in return, Rox tries to harm Garling's two sons, trying to get payback by forcing Garling to witness his own family getting hurt. So then Roger and Garp have no choice but to stand in his way, exclaiming that these two young boys, these two babies, they are not responsible for the sins of their father. That line, after all, is very meaningful. And if Roger and Garp showed to each other back then that they share this value, that could have been what affirmed for Roger that Garp is the right person to entrust with his own son Ace decades later. And the fact that this is now how everything starts to tie together. Rox, Garp, Roger, Blackbeard, Shanks, Garling, and now also Dragon. We see that Dragon may have saved Shanks, a really full circle moment, because we know that years later, Shanks would be the one to save Luffy. The cycle of humanity and protection. Dragon saves a boy who would then grow up to become a Yonko. That same Yonko puts everything on the line to protect the boy who will not only become a Yonko himself, but also the next Joy Boy. And if we put it thematically, the man who represents the revolution saves Shanks. Shanks, who represents balance, saves Luffy. And Luffy, who represents freedom, will one day change the entire course of history, flip the world on its head, bringing about the revolution that his very father seeks to achieve. I mean, if that is not a masterpiece of a story, I don't know what is. And now some other thoughts that I've had after finding out this massive reveal of Davy D Xebec. Well, no wonder that Xebec kept winning the Davy back fight. I mean, I feel like that's almost cheating. Rox is winning a family game. He is clearly at an unfair advantage. But then on a more serious note, I do wonder whether this heritage can also explain Blackbeard's abnormal biology. In particular, his capability to consume more than one devil fruit. I mean, so far I've only really talked about the symbolic and historical implications, but you can't forget the line that has haunted the One Piece fandom for decades. Marco's claim that Blackbeard's body is different, fueled more recently by the exchange between Katarina Devon and Saint Saturn, acknowledging that something is special about Teach. And this all seems to go back to the Davy D heritage, and possibly not just their family name, what they represented, who they were during the Void Century, but also some potential biological quirk. Anyways, those are just some of my thoughts on this whole Davy D reveal. Let me know what you think. Let me know any of your speculations by leaving a comment below. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please like the video, share the video, and again, please do subscribe. I'd really love your help in getting to 100,000 subscribers. In return, I'll make sure you don't miss out on more One Piece discussions. You can also help support the channel by becoming a channel member like these wonderful people. But as always, thank you for listening to another one of my One Piece ramblings. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.